Hi Andy, thanks for the footage. Just a quick recap of the overall swing and setup as we stand at the moment. Appreciate you've had a busy period, moving house, etc, etc, and the golf's maybe not been as active as you would have liked it. The step-in video relating to the questions that you've posed, I will be looking at that tomorrow afternoon when I finish teaching. I'll share that on the Google Drive as per usual, just to keep that private to me and yourself. In regards to your setup from down the line, what I'm seeing here, by the way, as an overall picture of things is a lot of improvements in some key areas, but a lot of other things that are still very similar to the last time I saw the swing on video, and they are, to the detriment of your overall golf. So if we take a little look at it sort of down the line first at setup, you still hold that handle a little bit too high. That makes the setting of the wrists a little bit more difficult than it should be. So we could do with you just maybe getting a little bit closer to it, getting a little bit lower with the handle as a result, maybe dropping the chin down a little bit as per Charlie down underneath your down the line footage. You can see your handle sitting slightly above the belt line, the eyes looking slightly out in front of the golf ball, if you will, or outside the ball to target line. Handle sitting slightly above the belt line, as a result the chin's up, and what that does, it just adds a little bit of roll to accumulator 3. There's nowhere near as much roll here as you used to get. The posture is just limiting your ability to load accumulator 2. If the hands were lower, the wrists would be more cocked at setup, and even if you were to maintain them, that would mean P2 would happen quicker. It would have the club a little bit more in line with the hands at that point, not quite as low and behind the hands as we see here with Charlie, but your overall controlling of accumulator 3 has improved. It's not as extreme as Charlie's. You can see there Charlie's is very much sort of gloved down. Yours now is a sort of compromise between where you used to be and where we'd like it to be. So I'd still like to see that working under a little bit more of a reverse roll, but again, you're working on the right things. It's starting to improve. The hands aren't leaving you as much as they were, they aren't drifting away from you as much as they were, etc, etc. From face on, I still see this situation where the upper centre gets out in front of the lower centre. Not a massive fan of that. I want to see the hips forward a little bit more, creating a touch of side bend. We can afford to have each centre over the top of one another at setup with an iron, but I do like to see with yourself the hips push forward a little bit more, creating a more vertical spine, or if anything, a touch of a side bend away from your target. It's not an ideal starting point for you from viewed from face on. Having said that, you get to the top of the backswing pretty well. That Frosby flop move, that idea of extending, a little bit of a drift off it there, but again, if the hips were forward a little bit more, that would create a little bit more of a realistic starting position, and as a result you wouldn't have to put that last little bit of side bend towards the target in as you complete the backswing. If we look at you at the top, in the grand scheme of things, centre of the shoulder turn, try that line again, just clumsy fingers on that one, centre of the shoulder turn and the centre of the hip turn, both pretty much in line with the centre of the stance, as we see with the likes of Grant and Charlie. So all in all, not a bad position to go from. You can see there, centre of the shoulder turn, relatively in line with the centre of the stance, over the top of the golf ball. So there's a lot of good things from that view face on. What I'm not a massive fan on, and this is the thing that I want to get across to you in the step in, is the way accumulator 3 works upon completing your backswing when viewed from down the line. What we see with Charlie, and this is the thing that you've got to try and get your head around, the right sequence in here. Accumulator 3 does nothing from P1 to P2, and then from P2 accumulator 3 starts to load. So there is a rotation of accumulator 3 to the top of the backswing. What I'm seeing at the moment with yourself is accumulator 3 loading much less than it did, but then from P2 onwards, accumulator 3 does not load. It actually reverse rolls a little bit on you, and we now get too much across the line at the top of the backswing. We start to look a little bit narrow, that right arm flexing a little bit too much. I'd much rather see the club on the plane line and the butt of the club on the plane line at that point in the golf swing. So again, it's a way, what does accumulator 3 actually do? It should do no loading from P1 to P2, and then it should load fully from P2 to P4. And when you look at a player who doesn't load accumulator 3 from 2 to 4, you'll tend to see the club drifting across the line. And then there are other things in there, a little bit of a cupping of the wrists, etc., etc., that really is just a byproduct of everything else that we just discussed. So I'd like to see an improved sequencing of accumulator 3 now. We've got it under control. It's loading much less. We need to continue on that vein. One of the questions I seem to remember you asking via the email was, how does Charlie get into the position he's in at the top of the backswing with 0 loading from P1 to P2? Well, what he does is, and this will be a great thought for you when you're hitting in the net, 0 loading, or if anything, a reverse roll of accumulator 3, P1 to P2, and then a maximum loading of accumulator 3 from P2 to P4. So a reverse roll followed by a maximum load, and I'll demonstrate that when we do the step-in video over at the range tomorrow. In regards to face on, the main issue I've got here is a complete lack of hip slide during the downswing. There's a lot of flexing forward, there's nowhere near enough linear movement in the hips, and that is why as you start down there's no linear movement. That's not going to keep the left arm in. It's not going to keep accumulator 3 loaded. It's just going to pull everything out in front of you. And that's where your slice stroke shank generally comes from. Right knee flexing forward. A little bit out of control with the flexing of the right knee. Exit very low. You can see you're not hitting out of that golf ball at all. So it's the move from the top in transition. We don't have enough linear movement from P4 to P6. If we consider what happens with your hip girdle from 4 to 6, it goes from being pretty much in the centre of your stance on the red line that we had before to where we now have it, which is slightly in front of centre but not a massive amount. You can see that the left thigh angled backwards, left knee not getting out in front of the left ankle, etc., etc. If we look at what Grant does, the hip slide is much more substantial. The centre of the hip girdle is getting more in line with the inside of his left leg or left foot. Much more substantial move of the lower body, the left knee. Far more hip slide during the downswing, which can be seen with Charlie as the hips slide forward. That creates some axis tilt. It keeps the right shoulder back, it keeps the left arm in, and it keeps the club in behind the hands. So we need to create much more of a linear move from 4 to 6. Now initially, what I'd like you to concentrate on to improve that is swing to P4 and stop. And when you get to P4, I want you to hold for at least 3 seconds. Once you've been holding it for 3 seconds, what I want you to then do is swing down at full speed and hit the golf ball. What you tend to find with players is initially it just encourages a slightly better sequencing. It doesn't finish the job, but it encourages the lower body to start the downswing, encourages a little bit more linear movement. It allows you to focus on your transition, and the feeling that you need in transition is that these hips are going forward as much and as fast as they can in the early part of the downswing. So you want to really feel that you're hitting the shot almost with that hip drive from the top. So swing to the top and stop. Very important you hold it for long enough. Stop for a count of 3. Once you've held it for 3, drive the hips from the top. Now initially it's going to be a little bit hit and miss because the wrists don't really know what to do to sort of compensate for that sequence, but gradually you'll start to tighten the radius, start to require less of a release, start to maintain the lag during the downswing, etc., etc. So that's thought number 1. So when you're in the net, You can do it piecemeal. It works really, really well, and I demonstrate the whole thing for you in the step-in. 0 loading of accumulator 3 from P1 to P2, followed by maximum loading of accumulator 3, P2 to P4. Hold that position for a count of 3, and then drive forward with the hips as much and as fast as you can. And really try and isolate the pieces, really try and get those pieces emphasised when you're working in the net at home. I appreciate that's where the bulk of your practice is going to be done at the moment. If you go on the golf course, trust it, go out and play. If you're hitting balls on the range, don't expect too much when you're doing those exercises in regards to the overall flight of your golf ball. The way I would work those changes in is by working in the net. Very piecemeal, very mechanics orientated, but that move definitely needs to get in. There's nowhere near enough hip shift from P4 to P6. Without any hip slide, the only way you can prevent the club coming across excessively is by extending, lifting the head off the wall, etc, etc. And when you do that, you can see again that there's not enough hip slide. If there was more hip slide, the head would be moved back down onto the wall. So it's hip slide from P4 to P6 that is killing you in the downswing, and it's the way that accumulator 3 works in the backswing that needs attention. I'm going to get Charlie up here now, bigger picture, let you have a closer look at that sequence we talked about before. 0 loading of accumulator 3 from P1 to P2. We know the effects that has. Improves the shoulder tilts, improves the hip tilts, improves the positioning of the club, etc, etc. Then from P2 to P4, load the hell out of accumulator 3. That's going to prevent the club getting across the line. It's going to prevent the arms getting lifted a little bit and that right arm over flexing. So 0 loading to P2, followed by maximum loading to P4. Once you've done that, the feeling in the downswing is as much hip slide as fast as you can from P4 to P6. That's going to prevent the arms being pulled out. It's going to keep the club in behind the hands, and it's also going to allow you to maintain your inclination through the golf ball during the rest of the golf swing. Good luck with it. If you've got any questions, feel free to find me an email. Like I say, I'll go through some of the key points and answer your questions upon completion of my coaching tomorrow.